which you can see the unfairness of it as well. We also saw that we had a big and a growing teacher gap, and there was an estimate of 17 million extra teachers needed only in sub-Saharan Africa by 2030. And in terms of the financing gap, I'm going to put this here, and I'm not going to go too much into details, but the $39 billion that was widely quoted in UNESCO and the World Development Report was only for external financing, okay? But what was needed, according to the Education Commission, was going from 1.2 trillion per year to 3 trillion per year to be able to reach the SDG 4. And this was only in low income and middle income countries by 2030. So we have been focusing too much, and all the attention seems to have been going to this 3% that is supposed to come from aid or loans, when the 97% should be coming from domestic resource mobilization. And this is what I'm going to be talking about. And even before COVID-19, debt service repayment were a big problem for most countries because they were eating away from their ability to finance public services, particularly education. So now what do we have with COVID-19? We have seen that it's forecast that the government revenues are falling and will continue to fall for the time being. And we also see that health and safety nets are being prioritized, at least in the short term. And again, education is being displaced in this sense. We see that there are increased levels of debt. All these countries are getting more in debt, and there are increased levels of poverty. People are losing their jobs, they are losing all the income opportunities, and we are seeing budget cuts and regressions. And you have the table on the right with, this is from the World Bank, the calculations, and you can see that before COVID, and we just go, for instance, to all the countries, they were spending 3.6%, and this is, sorry, I can, probably you can see this as well. So this is on the downside in terms of the forecast is minus 5.7, and you can see it for your region in here. I'm not going to go through all the numbers, but basically the situation is really alarming for education because we can see that there is a regression, that the revenues are falling, that even possibly the share of the government budget dedicated to education is shrinking as well because some other sectors are taking priority. And this is at a time when we actually need more money for education to make schools safe and in this pandemic, to reach out to all this growing number of children that are disadvantaged. And we know that they are very likely to never return to education unless there is a much bigger investment into it. And we are seeing that in this pandemic, all this time that children have been out of school, the education inequalities have been increasing, actually exponentially in many cases. And we also know that there are big interest and also because of the need of accessibility to invest in remote learning and technology. But these are big chunks of the budget. And a lot of it is being pushed by corporations. I won't dwell on it. Okay, is there any chance I don't see the, sorry, the notifications? Filani, you can help with that, that'd be great. So what to do? Because the situation seems to be quite doom and gloom. Well, we have some answers. Our answer is to actually invest in the 4 S's of the education budget, which are the share, the size, the sensitivity, and the scrutiny of the budget. Sorry, I can see a lot of notifications. I don't know why you can see them too. But anyway, so I'm going to pay more attention particularly to the size of the budget because it's the one that refers to the tax justice. But the share of the budget is a percentage of the budget dedicated, of the national budget dedicated to education, or the percentage of the gross domestic product dedicated to education. The size of the budget is the revenues overall. The sensitivity have to do with how it's actually allocated, whether it's with an equity criteria or most of the funds are actually going to the tertiary education that only serves a percentage of the population. And we can also look at the scrutiny. Is the money going where it's intended to go? What's happening actually in practice? So I'm not going to cover those two, the sensitivity and the scrutiny in this presentation, but I can talk more about it later if you like. So in terms of the share of the budget, it's about the percentage of the national budget spent on education. As I said, the benchmark is supposed to be between 15 to 20%, but 20% is for low-income countries, and this is a minimum. And this is useful to compare how much we are spending on education in comparison to the military, or to see what the other countries in the regions are doing. And this is very important in terms of the debt repayment services, because ActionAid launched a report very recently where we were studying how much countries are actually spending on debt repayment services, and those that were spending more than 12% have considerable reductions in terms of how much they were able to spend on education and health. And let's look, for instance, at countries such as Ghana, where 59% of the GDP is spent on debt repayment services. And all this, and debt is increasing. So this is going to be a growing trend in most countries, most low income, and well, in all countries really around the world, the ones that are lending the money. And in terms of the retrogressions, when we see the share of the budget, normally when you see the graph, it tends to be going up and down, or up. And the countries that I know the best are Ghana, Kenya, and Uganda, and some of them have been going down. And this is a retrogression that needs to be justified by the government. Otherwise, this can lead, it can be considered a human rights violation if it is not adequately justified. And when I mean justified, it needs to have happened some sort of, a big crisis like an earthquake or something like that. And in these countries, it hasn't happened. So the burden of the proof is on the state. Okay, so whenever we see that they were allocating 20% and all of a sudden goes to 18%, you can ask all these questions because it's not allowed without a justification. And then we also have to look at the recommendations that, for instance, the IMF is giving to countries whenever they are offering them loans, and particularly the constraint in terms of the public sector wage bills and how much they can spend on education as a percentage, or how much they can spend actually on recruiting teachers that are necessary. So this is the share. And I'm going to move now to the size of education, because you will see that in many countries, even when they have reached 20%, even above, and I can think of many situations in Kenya, Ghana, Ethiopia, many other countries still don't have enough to provide good quality and free public services, particularly education. So this cartoon represents a little bit this of like, okay, so we need more funds for education, and normally it's the Ministry of Finance saying, sorry, but we don't have more money, because education is always seen as a big expenditure, because we don't have like short-term gains as in other investments that you could make. So why do we need to be looking at the size of the budget? My colleague David Archer says that, even a big piece of a small cake is still is a small amount. So what we need to do is to increase the size of the cake or of the pie. And have a sweet tooth, that's why I always say cake. And so we need to be looking at how to increase this government budget. And for this, we should be looking at the relation between the tax to the gross domestic product. And this relation should be around 20% or higher. Okay, so this is what happened in high income countries. But we see that the average in low income countries is 14%. And in some countries such as Uganda or Pakistan, for instance, much lower. Why is this happening? Well, this is happening mainly because of the vast amounts of money lost to tax avoidance, which is legal, it's the loopholes that we are talking about, and which is morally wrong, but legal, okay? And tax evasion, which is illegal. And all of this is estimated to cause all these illicit financial flows that include both, although it can be a bit of a controversial term. It's estimated that Africa loses $88.6 billion every year, and this is a very conservative estimate. And it's estimated that nearly half of it is coming from the extractive industry. Okay, so like minerals and oil and diamonds, etc. And overall, CoP from the Tax Justice Network and Jansky, they estimated, and again, this is a conservative estimate, that the world is losing $500 billion per year. Okay, so how can we increase the size of the budget? So we need to be talking about tax justice, which is about fair and progressive tax system. So what do we mean by a progressive tax system? It's a system where those more able to pay, so the rich and the wealthy, pay a higher percentage of their salary or their income or their wealth than those who are less able to pay, the poor, who should be paying less or actually to be exempted from paying taxes. And we normally have to be looking at the tax mix between direct versus indirect taxes. So direct taxes tend to be overall the good ones because they are targeted and they tax more those, if it is properly done, they should be taxing more the rich people. So we are talking about pay as you earn or income tax, about corporate income tax, etc. Whereas what we see in most of these low and middle income countries is that they heavily rely on indirect taxes, such as VAT, okay, or sales taxes. And these affect a lot more poor people and particularly women. Okay, so there is also a gender element to it. So tax justice doesn't only refer to the revenue side of it, it also affects to the expenditure because it advocates for pro-poor policies and interventions. And a fair tax system where resources are mobilized and domestically to finance development and public services. And here I just want to show you that tax justice, normally we only refer to the revenue, but it's also about expenditure. I'm not going to go through all these things, but I think it's important for you to bear in mind that tax justice is actually quite a comprehensive topic and area of study, and we should all be more aware of it. Because let me just mention a couple of things, for instance, about extractives. As I said, it's estimated that half of the illicit financial flows are actually originating from the extractive industries. So particularly Africa is losing vast amounts of revenue because of mispricing, because of all these big corporations saying that they are making X amount of money in their like mining industries when they're actually making a lot more money but not declaring it. So this is very simple, but it gives you an idea. Also the tax treaties that they are signing with, let's say, Mauritius, with the Netherlands, that are really unequal in terms of the taxing rights that the government have. So they can actually get very little revenue from the companies that are investing in those countries. And this is to attract foreign direct investment. And I'm going to just very briefly mention the digital taxation because ActionAid will be launching a report, I think next Monday. I'm not going to say more about it, but it's about how to tax now the digital industry because it's really growing, and we all know that the Silicon Valley is making a lot of money, but this money is definitely not trickled down. It's not the countries, particularly low and middle income countries, are not really benefiting from this. It's more, again, another extractive industry in that sense. So tax, as I said before, then we also have the expending side on these pro-poor and gender responsive policies and interventions, about how to make decision-making more transparent, participatory, about how much to allocate actually to debt versus public services. And as I said before, it shouldn't be more than 12% of the national budget shouldn't be going into debt repayment services, because otherwise it will have some really negative consequences on the ability to pay for education and health and other public services. And we should be looking, as I said before, to the four S's: the share, size, sensitivity, and the scrutiny. So why tax justice then? So tax justice, we were talking about the 4 S's. We also talk about the 4 A's of education. Well, now in tax justice, we talk about the 4 R's. So we talk about revenue, redistribution, repricing, and representation. So in terms of revenue, taxation offers an opportunity for collection, mobilization of funds, resources to spend on public services such as education, health, infrastructure, etc. It also helps redistribute wealth because taxation ensures the transferring of wealth from rich to the poor through a proper intervention, okay, lowering the levels of inequality in the country. It also helps with repricing because taxation can be used as a tool to encourage or discourage consumption of specific goods and services within the economy. So we can be talking about tobacco, we can be talking about sugar, but we can also be talking about polluting industries. So those, let's think of those big, like for instance, mining or other corporations that are actually the destruction is contributing to the degradation of the environment or the communities living around, they should be taxed more to pay for the damage they are doing and also to discourage that damage. And it also has to do with representation because taxation establishes this social contract between the citizens on the one hand and the states, because we pay our taxes and we expect public services in return. Okay, and this can be a really powerful tool to demand good governance, to demand good quality institutions, and it reinforces governance and democracy. So really, what's not to like about tax justice, I would say. And this is why it's so important to use it for financing of education, because when we are talking about education, we are talking about a long-term investment. We are talking about economics. We cannot be recruiting teachers for a period of months and then let them go. This is not how it works or how it shouldn't work. It can work in the private sector, but that's what they do. But if we want to reach the SDG 4, we need to be thinking about sustainable financing. And the best way to think about sustainable financing is to actually increase domestic resource mobilization. So it's taxation, and it has to be done progressively, because then it also increases democratic accountability, increases good governance, increases transparency and participation, increases institutional quality, and is the best way to actually provide human rights, which is like public services, good quality, publicly financed, and progressively through progressive taxation. Because the alternative is really grim, which is more privatization, more inequality, and many other bad things. And I'm going to stop in here. If that's okay, Bernard, over to you.
Thank you so much, Maria. Thank you very much. We really appreciate your presentation, which is absolutely fantastic. I think that you provided all the elements together in order to understand tax justice in a better way and its relation to education. We have some people waiting in the waiting room, so let me see if we can admit them. Are you able to admit our colleagues now, Pilani, or? Because we had an issue on admitting people while you were presenting. I don't know why. These technical issues that I don't understand. Anyway, okay, guys. So now we have time for discussion, to questions to Maria, and to openly discuss about the issue. So the floor is open. I would suggest that you raise your hand. You have your icon here. You just need to raise your hand and I will give the floor if you want to comment or to make questions to Maria. So the floor is open now. Anyone? Yes, please.
More slides if you want to. So.
Go on, Stephen, please.
Sure. Hi. Thank you, Maria. That was a great presentation. A lot of information in a real short time. That decrease that's predicted by the World Bank of like 5% overall, is that a one-time drop, or is that? It sounded like it was 1 year's drop, that they expect next year the budget for education to go down by 5%. Is that it?
That was the paper that they presenting a few months ago. So this is how I understand it as well. But you probably know more than that, more than me in that sense.
Yeah, no, that's a significant drop, and education is in a lot of trouble if that happens.
Exactly.
What are the prospects
We
for
need even more. Sorry?
No, my other question is, I mean, the size of the budget is the main thing. Because, you know, it seems to me that 17% is pretty close to 20%, and 20% isn't enough. So that increasing the share of the budget to 20% is not going to get over the huge inequalities you see between countries and between low-income countries and middle-income countries. So the big thing is the size of the budget. And is there any movement on that? Is there any? I mean, that's taxation issues and.
Yeah, I mean, the countries I know best are Ghana, Kenya, and Uganda, and the tax to GDP has been increasing, but it's about how to increase it also progressively. And yeah, I agree with you that we should be focusing on the size, but without losing sight of the share as well. It has to be 20%, and this 17% is an average, but it really masks some countries that are getting a lot more than 20, and some countries that are really low. Let's say Uganda has been 11 to 13%, really, really low, or Pakistan, for instance. And also the sensitivity. Some countries are allocating vast amount to tertiary education or nearly nothing to secondary education. And this is very important. And where is it going? Is it going only to urban areas or to rural areas? And then once it's actually allocated, is it utilized or not? Because the scrutiny of the budget, that's something that people who keep saying, oh, money is not the solution. That's what they are using, because a lot of it gets wasted. Not so much as they said, definitely not, but we all need to be involved. We all need to be more aware, like to work more towards like budget tracking, to make sure how much, where it's going, what is going where, and we all need to be participating in those decisions, because the decision makers should be a lot more transparent in that sense. And this is the whole thing about accountability and transparency. But absolutely, we need to be focusing on the size of the budget, because at the end of the day, if it is going to be a small amount, it doesn't matter how big the percentage is going to be. We will never be able to finance education, so it's good quality and free. And this is what we are seeing at the moment. That is not good quality, and we are seeing a lot of like the private providers, like, you know, like making the most of that, capitalizing on that need and just pushing for public education, saying that it is a lot worse quality than it actually is. And it's just, the situation is rather grim in that sense.
Thanks, Maria.
Thank you very much, Maria and Stephen, for your question. Now I have Huraye Mabaduane. Please go on.
Thank you very much, Werner, for giving me the floor. And thank you so much, Maria, for a very enlightening presentation. As my predecessor said, a lot of very useful information in a very compact way. I do have a suggestion and also a question. The suggestion being that I think we will gain to have a more holistic approach of the education financing issue. I see that ActionAid has just launched a policy brief that is looking at IMF response to the COVID-19 in the health sector, and namely the issue, the policy advice around austerity, etc. And I think this is the way to go, but we need to be more comprehensive in the sense that we need to challenge the overall global economic regime, i.e. we should not only look at World Bank and IMF, we should also look at the World Trade Organization. We should also go into some spaces where decisions are being made which do impact our lives in our countries, like Davos, etc. We need to start thinking about all those spaces where we need to be and have our presence felt, and show people that those high-level discussions, quote unquote, they are having have very concrete implications in our everyday life and in our capacity to access our rights, our basic human rights. And we also need to remind them of the Maastricht principles, whereby the donors do have a responsibility to make sure that their interventions do not have a negative impact on people's human rights. That was the suggestion. In other words, I do see a move towards what I'm thinking needs to be done, and I want us just to be more, have a more holistic approach and be more comprehensive and target more of those institutions and regimes that have that effect on us. The second one is a question, because for me, it is important that we join that movement. And part of what I do, sorry, I did not introduce myself. My name is Urey Mamadou Anne. I'm from FAWE, the Forum for African Women Educationalists. We are present in 33 African countries with 34 national chapters, because we have 2 in Tanzania, mainland and Zanzibar. We do have chapters that are Lusophone, chapters that are Anglophone, Francophone. And one of the difficulty I'm always encountering when I see a very good piece of information, a document, etc., and I'm like, very enthusiastic, great. I need to share this within and across the FAWE network, because we don't only have the national chapters, we have all our members being a membership organization. But then again, the language issue comes in. And just to give you one example, that policy brief you just launched recently on IMF and health, I had to summarize it, translate it into French before we can share it with our members and our national chapters. So in other words, my plea is, if we do not want to create another form of exclusion of public goods, public knowledge goods, we must also bear in mind that there are other language families which we need to serve. It was worth for me doing that work. Of course, this is not what FAWE is paying me for. It is not part of my mission, but it is just that this information is so fundamental that I thought it is worth putting some additional hours and do that work. If my plea is, please don't forget to also produce in other languages, so that we all have the same level of information, because that information is so important, fundamental, and critical for our success together. Sorry for having been long.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you so much. And yeah, I completely agree. And in many occasions, we have translated like reports. And also I was just thinking of a particular video, which is targeted, you know, like children or also teachers, like more like the education community as such, in terms of the need for tax justice to be able to finance public education. I can share it later, and that was translated into a variety of languages, including French, of course. And yeah, absolutely. And if you could please send me the translation that you have made, that'd be great. And then we can just use that also as the basis for it. It's just that very often we are just like pressed of time, as you know, when you are working in a big organization and you just need to launch the report. And then, but yeah, definitely we should really make sure that it is translated so everyone can access it, because it's part of what we are doing.
Sure, as soon as we finalize, I could share.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maria and Hulaye. Rene, please go on.
Yeah, thank you, Bernard, and thank you, Maria, for that very informative presentation. Now, looking at the situation, and it's definitely not looking good, we would like to know, some gains that we have, because, tax justice has been around for the last 50, 60 years, campaigning, and it would be good to also learn from victories that we may have in terms of, increasing taxes, making it more progressive, and addressing the problem of tax avoidance and evasion, no? And the tax havens that are all around us, our neighboring countries, even Switzerland is probably the biggest, one of the biggest, tax haven, no? Now, this could be good learnings for us, because when we, it's a really a tough issue. Probably budget intervention may be a bit easier, although it's also complicated, but addressing taxes, which is always unpopular, no? Very unpopular for most governments and even for the constituency. And so we want to learn whatever gains we had in the past, no? Now, I remember also, these running campaigns about addressing tax evasion, illicit financial flows, no? And during the Financing for Development conference, maybe in 2015, which civil society actually did not endorse, at the time, and rejected the outcome document because it really fell short. Now, because we know that it's really a big, institutions that we are fighting, no, and we want to address. And I haven't seen any tangible gains in the propositions that was put forward to reform the global tax system, no? Because OECD and donor community is really steadfast and quite stubborn about, dominating the global tax mechanism. And so I think while we continue the campaign at the global level with the financial institutions, it's also good to, campaign at the local and at the national level where, we can have some victories. And so we want to look also at good examples at the local level where we were able to, do some tax reform. So we would like to learn from the examples, especially Africa and Latin America, maybe, and even in Europe. What countries have implemented really progressive or a little progressive taxation system in their situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rene. You raised very many important points, but I think that there is some hope in terms of, you were talking about the unpopularity of paying taxes, and I agree, and a lot of it has to do with not getting good public services in exchange. Why are you paying taxes if you think that your system is very corrupt and you are just paying and you are not getting anything in exchange? So this can be, again, a really positive, and instead of a vicious cycle, this is a a good cycle, you know, in terms of you see good things, you pay more taxes, and then you build that system in that sense. But in terms of some of the successes of this, as you said, yes, tax justice has been for a while, like working like for 50, 60 years, but this link between tax justice and taxation is newer, and I think it's being very powerful. And I think that, again, it would be very, very fertile in this sense, and that's why we are trying to raise awareness of what tax justice is, and that's not something to leave it to the economists. That's something that all the education activists, practitioners, we should be really aware of. The budget is very important. And again, we have seen the Panama Papers, the Paradise Papers, and how the public has really reacted, like with outrage. It's just like, we just see that the levels of inequality are increasing massively, okay? And that the rich people are not paying their fair share, and that there are big companies, big enablers of tax avoidance and evasion, like the big four, you know, like, you know, KPM. I'm not going to mention it because I'm being live stream, but you know, and also banks, and all of these act as enablers and facilitators for all this tax avoidance, like to make sure that big corporations are not paying their fair share, even when they are making loads of money. But we are getting also some successes. And as you were saying, so I can mention quite a few, for instance, of some of the renegotiations of these tax treaties with, let's say, with Mauritius, with Uganda, they are currently reviewing the one with the Netherlands, that they were losing vast amount of money with them. And this is something that is really catching on in many countries. They're just like reviewing all these historical tax treaties that are really negative for their economy. We also, with the COVID-19, there are some positive things. And we have seen in many countries, many tax reforms that have been a lot more progressive, even in the UK, you know, like that, helping people to be able to survive this big recession. And some of the measures that you would normally associate more with like labor or socialist government are being even implemented by very conservative governments. And in Africa, we have seen an increase of tax exceptions for poor people and small businesses rather than the big corporations. So there are also some glimpses of hope in that sense. And without proper advocacy and without mobilization, we are not going to get these results. And in terms of at local level, I can give you more examples where, for instance, there is a really nice example of Pakistan where we were working where in a particular area, after the raising awareness, one of the teachers took it to heart and was just like going through the community with some of this participatory action research methodology, like deciding how much money are actually people paying in just even in cigarettes with the sales taxes or VAT. And they just like put it together, and they went to the local officials and said, our school is not working because it's not safe, so no children can go to the school. We are paying this amount in taxes and we are not getting anything in it. And because of that pressure, the local government accepted and committed to improve, to actually fix the facilities in the school, and it actually worked, and children were able to go to that school. We have some other similar cases also in Tanzania, in Uganda, where they have built more building blocks and more health facilities. We have many of those, like particularly localized stories of how raising awareness about taxes paying for public services is just putting that extra level of pressure, and it's making that direct accountability between citizens and the government. Because very often when you ask people in the schools where we work, what do we need in the school improvement plan? We need like, I don't know, like toilets or sanitary facilities or new building blocks or this and this. And okay, and now who is supposed to pay for that? So often they would say donors, well, NGOs particularly, because we have broken that accountability. They don't think that the state should be paying for that, because very often it would be the parents themselves making like paying for fees, for they call it the development fees, parents association fees, even where it's supposed to be free public education. Parents, as we saw, they are paying big amount of money, both for public and for private education, because the money is not getting to the actual schools. So this accountability, this social contract has been broken because of this, because the amount that families are paying for services that are supposed to be free and public, and because donors are also giving that money. So the more ODA that is actually invested for to build public schools, etc., the less the accountability and the less the sustainability as well, because then you have a new and more conservative government that decides to give less money in ODA, and then all these plans like fall down unless you actually have taxation in a way of domestic resource mobilization to be able to pay for all these expenditures in education. You will really struggle to hire more teachers. You will really struggle to just properly finance education so it is good quality and free. And yeah, I think I will leave it there.
Thank you so much, Maria. I think we have time for a couple of more interventions. So I will give the floor to Aminta. Aminta Navarro de Honduras. Es tu turno, por favor. She will speak in Spanish.
Gracias, Berno. Quiero felicitar a María por su exposición muy importante, con mucha información. Yo vivo en Honduras, en Centroamérica, y Centroamérica tiene pues esa particularidad de tener unos sistemas de educación que en términos financieros son muy estrechos. Digamos que los gobiernos vienen cada año reduciendo los presupuestos. Y como bien decía María, un punto importante es que la financiación de la educación en los países pobres o medios como los nuestros en Centroamérica se financian con los impuestos del IVA y no con los impuestos de, digamos, de la gran empresa que generalmente no cumple, digamos, como debería de ser. Muchas empresas en nuestros países gozan de exoneración del pago de impuestos, ¿verdad? Entre ellos tenemos, para el caso de Honduras, que es lo que conozco más, la exoneración a todo lo que es la inversión en las comidas rápidas. Ellos no pagan, más de creo 30 años en el país que no se pagan. Fueron los primeros en despedir a sus empleados cuando se presentó también la pandemia. Y otro de los puntos también es que es con lo de los porcentajes en los presupuestos, porque cuando un presupuesto se sostiene va sobre la recaudación del IVA, en momentos como los actuales, esta recaudación fiscal se reduce. ¿Qué implica entonces? Que se tiene menos dinero para la educación. Sin embargo, creo que en todo el tema de la justiciabilidad también debemos de luchar porque la educación sea una prioridad en los países, ¿verdad? Y esa prioridad también, como ya lo sabemos, se mira mucho en el presupuesto, pero la prioridad en nuestros países y sobre todo lo que llamamos el Triángulo Norte en Centroamérica, que es Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, Nicaragua, ¿verdad? La prioridad está en seguridad. O sea, son miles de millones para la seguridad nacional, la seguridad fronteriza, para una zona que no está en guerra, pero también para una gran inversión de seguridad interna, cada vez más fortalecimiento de la policía, más fortalecimiento de las fuerzas militares y la educación, y como también decía María, la salud, que se ha visto en estos momentos de la pandemia, realmente se ha puesto al descubierto. Lo que teníamos no es que la pandemia lo haya creado, es sencillamente que lo ha hecho más visible, ¿verdad? En el tema de educación y de salud. Recientemente estábamos haciendo un diagnóstico sobre el acceso a tecnología en una de las comunidades y que revela lo que sabemos. Las familias más pobres son las que más pagan por la educación. Las familias están haciendo en estos momentos elección entre comprar alimentos, pagar la conectividad o pagar la renta, porque si no, no pueden seguir viviendo en una casa más o menos digna. Estos son desafíos que tenemos y creo que son desafíos a nivel holístico, como dijo alguien que me antecedió, pero también se requiere un fuerte trabajo y de concienciación de ciudadanía para reclamar una mayor inversión fiscal y también poder llegar a consensos en los países, porque debe ser a lo interno también, debe de haber esa conciencia de una mayor inversión del presupuesto nacional, pero que las empresas deben pagar y no solamente la población más pobre paga el IVA, como bien lo expresó María. Gracias.
Muchas gracias, Aminta. María, ¿quieres comentar?
Sí, muchísimas gracias, Aminta. Voy a hablar en inglés, ¿vale? Pero genial, todos los puntos. Yeah, I'm going to say, brilliant. Absolutely. We can see that when you are relying, as you said, on VAT, especially now in cases where people are, like they're not really consuming, you also see that decrease as well. And at the end of the day, there are some companies that are really doing very well out of this crisis and are not being taxed. And there are many countries that are not doing well that in this crisis, but they have done very well many years before. They weren't paying their taxes, and now they are asking for bailouts as well. Okay, so this is something very important when you are when countries are heavily indebted and they are asking for more debt to be able to bail out some companies that weren't even paying taxes properly in the first place. This is something that we really need to question again. And absolutely, that's what I was saying again, that it's not only the sizes, we still have to be looking at the 4 S's. The share is still very important because, as Aminta was saying, we see in many countries that there are big percentages of the national budget dedicated to the military and to the police. And this is something which is very worrying, again, for democracy as well as for the ability to actually properly finance education and other public services. And absolutely, we see this in a variety of countries, that those that are the poorest are paying the highest percentage of the household income in education. And that's what I showed before in I think it was in the second slide. In terms of low-income countries, the expenditure for education, it was very similar, the household expenditure and the government expenditure, which is outrageous. It really is outrageous, because this means that large number of children are not able to access education because of that, because they are forcing families to choose between their children, or as Aminta said, to choose between education and other basic needs. And this is also something that privatization is doing, and all these low-fee private schools being pushed are excluding people, those who cannot pay for it. Education shouldn't be affordable, it should be free. Free means free, including uniforms, including textbooks, including everything that would constitute a barrier not to be able to go to education. Okay, and they are trying to change that discourse from free to affordability, from public provided to non-state actors being very important, and partnerships. And this is something that we need to worry about. And a lot of it stems from the financing and the excuse of not being able to finance good, free public education is there. And unless you know what's behind it, and you know that the size of the budget can be increased if you actually tackle it properly through progressive taxation, you won't be able to make the argument, and you will carry on fighting against other public services between health and education, or who should get the biggest share of the budget. We shouldn't be fighting. We should be all together saying, no, what you need to increase is the size of the budget by taxing all those corporations that are getting away without paying anything and are just returning a lot of investments, you know, and are being like put it into tax havens. So thank you, sorry.
Thank you so much, Maria. I think that we have time for our last intervention. Horaye asked the floor again, so I will give her the floor for a very brief presentation before we end this session.
Thank you again, Werner. I'm just wondering about the following suggestion and how acceptable it could be to a crowd like ours and also to the work we endeavor to achieve together. And a rationale for it is that we oftentimes encounter from our vis-a-vis the kind of discourse around tax justice fatigue or developing countries again coming with demands, etc. So would it be something we wish to consider that we rebrand our narrative and seek allies where we did not think about yet? For example, in the industrial countries, we know that they are also fighting currently their own tax justice fight against the GAFA. And I'm just thinking, would it not be a good idea to try to build bridges and to show that, reassert the legitimacy of our demands? Because even though the concrete challenges are not the same, the mechanisms that underpin those challenges and our reclamations are identical. And we could at least partner and agree around that minimum objective of working together and reinforcing each other's discourse legitimacy.
Thank you, Raya. Maria, a last comment to this, please.
Yeah, definitely. We should really build bridges because what we have, our opposite, the big corporations are too powerful for only one organization or for only one constituency to be going against, like, you know, tax justice is a really big demand. Progressive taxation is a big demand. Making all these companies that are paying loads of money and are being backed by, you know, by big auditing companies and big banks, etc. It's too much at stake. So definitely it's about building bridges, making coalitions, being more aware, raising awareness, as we were saying, about at all levels, international, but also national and local level. We all need to be working together, definitely.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I fully agree with this. You mentioned, Maria, that Africa loses 88.6 billion every year, meaning that this is not only a government responsibility, but this is a human rights issue. I mean, all these big corporations have a lot of responsibilities and obligations regarding the realization of human rights in general, and specifically on the right to education. So if we do not address tax justice as a clear component of the human rights obligations, it will be very difficult to take advantage to have some key advantages or key steps moving towards our world to a human rights dignification. So we can, for instance, we see how corporations have a place in the table of discussions on education policies. And we also know that they are not paying fair taxes in the country where they profit. So it has no sense. So until we bring these corporations into the table of their obligations, it will be very difficult to really move forward. So colleagues, this is just the beginning. We are not finishing tax justice discussion now. This is, I think that one of the initial discussion that we should have within GCE members and GCE partners. So let me thank you, Maria, for your brilliant presentation, and thank you all for your interest and your participation. We will share the presentation that Maria brought today, and we will also be sharing the recording of this session. So I will keep you posted on the upcoming sessions of this community of practice, and please participate. Just give us the chance to know what you think about these issues. Thank you so much, colleagues. Have a great day. Thank you, Maria. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you very much, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Very enlightening. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Thank you.